Welcome back to The Explainer. Okay, let's just get right into it. How did one single country, the United States, become the most powerful empire in, well, all of human history? The answer, it's probably not what you're thinking. It's not just about ideas or people or technology. Nope, it's actually written right into the land itself, the rocks, the rivers, the very shape of the North American continent. Okay, so before we dive in, let's just wrap our heads around the sheer scale we're talking about here. The US has just under 5% of the world's population, just a small slice. But get this, it controls around 30% of all the wealth on the entire planet. That is just a wild, staggering concentration of economic power. And all that money? Well, it's backed up by some serious military muscle. We're talking about a defense budget that makes up nearly 40% of what every country on Earth spends combined. And the US Navy, by itself, it accounts for half of the world's entire naval fleet. By weight. It's a force that can literally project its power to any corner of the globe in less than 2 days. And look, this isn't some new thing. For over 130 years, through world wars, the Great Depression, you name it, America has consistently been the world's biggest economy. It's actually the only country that has finished every single decade for the past century and a half richer than when it started. Think about that. Every decade, no matter what. So yeah, that brings us right back to the big question, the one we're here to answer. How? I mean, really, how is that kind of sustained power even possible? Where does it all come from? What's the secret sauce? Well, the answer we're exploring today is that the North American continent is just, geographically speaking, completely overpowered. It's so blessed with natural advantages that pretty much any group of people who manage to control it were almost destined to become a world superpower. So the biggest reason for America's power? It's not the people, it's not the politics, it's the place. All right, so let's get into it. We're going to break down this whole geographic blueprint. First, we'll look at the continent's incredible river superhighway. Then, we'll see how it's protected like a natural Fort Knox. After that, we'll explore its unstoppable energy engine, dig into a few hidden cracks in the foundation, and finally, we'll tackle the big paradox of America's place in the world. Okay, first up, the absolute engine room of the continent's power, its rivers. And we're not just talking about water here. We're talking about a free, ready-made commercial highway system that has no equal anywhere else on Earth. And right at the heart of all this is the greater Mississippi Basin. Now, it's the longest navigable river in the world, sure, but what's really important is that its main branches, the Missouri, the Ohio, the Arkansas, are mostly super calm and flat. What does that mean? It means for thousands of years, you could hop in a boat in the Gulf of Mexico and sail thousands of kilometers deep into the continent without hitting a single major waterfall or rapid. It is, quite literally, a natural superhighway. And this is where the simple, brutal math comes in. Moving stuff by water is somewhere between 10 and 30 times cheaper than moving it by land. Just think about it for a second. Building and maintaining roads and railways costs an absolute fortune. Rivers, they're just there, for free. This isn't just a small leg up. It's a massive, permanent economic cheat code that saves an unbelievable amount of money on transport. The sheer scale of this system is just, it's hard to wrap your head around. If you add up all the internal rivers in the Mississippi Basin, plus the Intracoastal Waterway, which is basically a protected shipping lane along the coast, you get nearly 25,000 kilometers of usable waterways. That is more than the rest of the planet combined. It connects everything into one giant economic zone, from Pittsburgh all the way to Sioux City and out to the East Coast. So, we've got this incredible transportation network, but that's just the first layer. Now let's see how this whole system gets supercharged by even more geographic gifts, because it's not just one thing, it's a whole bunch of advantages all stacked on top of each other. And this is where it gets really crazy, because what happens to be sitting directly on top of this world-class river network? Oh, just the largest single connected patch of amazing farmland on the entire planet, the American Midwest. It's a perfect storm, a perfect recipe for building a superpower. You can grow insane amounts of food and then ship it anywhere in the world for next to nothing. So the result? Exactly what you'd expect. This one region cranks out almost a third of the whole world's supply of corn and soybeans. It's an agricultural juggernaut, all thanks to that perfect marriage of soil and water, generating over $150 billion worth of crops every single year. Okay, so this leads to the next big advantage, access to the sea. America's coasts are just loaded with some of the best natural deep water harbors you could ask for. And to give you some perspective, get this quote. The Chesapeake Bay, by itself, has more coastline than the entire country of India. Let that sink in. That's just one bay. This gives the US a massive head start when it comes to building ports and projecting naval power. So, you've got this incredibly productive core, right? And what's surrounding it? Well, basically, the perfect defense. To the north, you have the Canadian Shield. It's this huge area of ancient rock with terrible soil, which means a large competing population was never going to spring up there. To the south, Mexico is super mountainous and has no real navigable rivers, making it really tough to unify and project power north. And then to the east and west, two gigantic oceans. They're the world's greatest moat. It's no accident the US mainland hasn't been successfully invaded in over 200 years. Now, for a long, long time, there was one major weak spot in this whole geographic fortress: energy. For decades, the US was dangerously reliant on oil from the Middle East. But then, a revolution happened. Not on a battlefield, but deep, deep underground. Just look at this timeline. It shows a complete 180. Back in 1973, the OPEC embargo basically brought the country to its knees. By 2005, things were even worse, with the US importing 60% of its oil. But then came fracking, a total game changer. And by 2018, the US had shot past Russia and Saudi Arabia to once again become the world's #1 oil producer. And here's the really crucial part. This energy wasn't in some colony halfway across the world. No, it was unlocked from shale rock deep inside the continent itself. We're talking about massive fields like the Permian Basin that can power the country for generations. This shale revolution basically plugged the last major hole in America's strategic armor, turning it into a true energy fortress. But, no system is ever perfect. Even this overpowered geography has a couple of critical weaknesses. And both of them, interestingly enough, come together at one single super important spot on the map. Both of these threats are aimed right at the gatekeeper of the entire system, the city of New Orleans. First, you've got the strategic threat. Cuba sits right there like a cork in a bottle at the entrance to the Gulf of Mexico. A hostile power there could literally choke off the Mississippi Delta, and that explains a lot about U.S. foreign policy towards Cuba. Then there's the geologic threat. The Mississippi River, as a force of nature, is trying with all its might to change its path and just bypass New Orleans completely, which would make centuries of infrastructure totally worthless overnight. This geologic threat is so real, so imminent, that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers has basically been at war with the river for decades. This thing you see here, the old river control structure, is a massive engineering project that literally forces the river to keep flowing past New Orleans. It is an unbelievable feat of human engineering, holding back what would be an economic disaster on a scale that's almost impossible to imagine. Okay, so this all brings us to one last, really fascinating paradox. If the U.S. is this self-sufficient, untouchable fortress, then why is it so deeply involved in every little thing happening all over the world? Why does its Navy police the global oceans? Well, the answer is pretty simple: the modern global economy. See, while the U.S. might be energy independent, its economy definitely is not. Something like 30% of its entire GDP, we're talking nearly 40 million American jobs, depends directly on global trade. So yeah, the US might not need Middle Eastern oil for its own cars anymore, but its trading partners in Europe and Asia sure do. If their economies crash because of a disruption, the American economy goes right down with them. And that leaves us with the big central question for America's future, doesn't it? Its incredible geography gave it the foundation to become this secure continental fortress, but its own economic success has now chained its fate to the stability of the entire world outside its walls. The very thing that made it so powerful, its ability to safely trade with everyone, now makes it totally dependent on a very fragile global system. And figuring out how to navigate that paradox, well, that's the great challenge of the 21st century.